Rowdy little kids waking up their parents. It's such a beautiful day. It's such a beautiful day. It's such a beautiful day in the neighborhood. The birds are chirping, lawnmowers cutting, barbecue burning, dead animals. It's such a beautiful day. It's such a beautiful day. It's such a fishing day. It's such a wonderful day. It's such a beautiful day. It's such a gorgeous day. It's such a happy day. It's such a beautiful day in the neighborhood.
Ah, it's beautiful, but goddamn, why do we take a day off? There's so much news.
And it's hot AF, and it's almost Halloween.
Yep.
My kid's gonna have to wear a bikini to trick or treat.
Yeah, we gotta have to change his costume.
Yep. Anyway, I just can't get over how it's supposed to be in the 90s and
Yeah.
around the corner. How am I supposed to make bone broth and stews?
Yeah.
All I can do is like make margaritas.
It's all you can do, man. It's all you can do. That's
Struggle is real.
the Samhain margaritas, man. That's traditional somewhere.
Yeah, I can make put in some food coloring and make orange margaritas.
Probably doing the Day of the Dead, margaritas.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So much news.
Yeah, our neighbors to the north had an election, and I have to say, I was a really good student. I went to private schools. I don't know shit about Canada's provinces and the way they run their government. Like, we're not taught that. I don't really understand it. I can tell you some other things, a little bit about other countries all over the world, but I don't know anything about Canada. So I've been kind of giving myself a crash course in the morning and, reading social media posts by some of my friends who live up there. So they had their election, and Justin Trudeau did win the prime minister's seat, but I guess barely. I guess it was, too close for a lot of people's comfort. And then in the parliament, I'm just trying to figure it out, because they're using this term called minority government, which my friends use and the news uses. So I try to figure out what that was. Essentially, my understanding is that it's when the prime minister in this case, okay, he's a liberal, so that's in the prime minister's seat. But his party does not have a majority in parliament. So that makes his government a minority government, is how I understand it. And also, what I hear is that it got really close, because a lot of people on the left voted for people who had no chance of winning, and then that gave the right, more votes. And I've been saying this constantly in the last election that we had. A vote for Jill Stein is a vote for Trump. A vote for any right-in person is a vote for Trump. No vote is a vote for Trump. Like, we had so many people who stayed home and didn't vote because they were, Bernie or bust people. They didn't like Hillary. They didn't like Trump. So they just didn't vote. And that handed him the vote. Like, interference or no interference, like, that has a lot to do with why he won. Like, all the people who, like, if you put a gun to their head, they'd vote for Hillary. She would have won by a landslide, but they just didn't want to do it. So I was just going to read. Do you have anything to say about that? Also, I was talking about, they kind of had, like, a Nader effect. Yeah. Like, some of them, like, liberal people voted for the Green Party, or there's, like a far left party that some of them voted for. Like, ultimately, the liberals, there's differences, but they ultimately do not want the neoconservatives at all, ever. And they just watered down the vote, and it almost was really bad. So my friends are saying, it's not perfect. we have a minority government, but at least, the prime minister won, and the neoconservatives didn't win. So they're like ultimately, they're not going to lose sleep over it the way I did when Trump won. But it's not ideal. But I think they sort of think they dodged a bullet regardless. So I'm going to read this. It's from another thing I want to say is that I get most of my news from Huffington Post, and they did not have a single mention of Canada's elections. Maybe they did yesterday or something, but they did not have anything today, and that just, further drives us Americans to know very little about Canada and how their government works. So I thought it was kind of sad. So this is on Vox. I saw something on The Guardian too, but it kind of cuts off. So this is from Vox. Justin Trudeau's Liberals won Canada's election. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's Liberal Party has won the 2019 Canadian federal election, according to projection from the CBC. While the Liberals lost seats in Parliament, controlling only a plurality of seats rather than an outright majority, they still have enough to keep control of government. This was an especially bitter campaign in Canada. Trudeau's government had been rocked by two serious scandals, one involving photos of the Prime Minister in blackface and brownface, the other involving political interference with a federal prosecution. His campaign went negative, attacking Andrew Scheer. I don't even know how to pronounce this guy's name, so forgive me if I butchered it. Andrew Scheer, the leader of the opposition Conservative Party, as unacceptably conservative on social and economic issues to scare the generally progressive Canadian electorate into sticking with them. Apparently it worked. While liberal power in Parliament is diminished, it's still a win for the embattled Prime Minister. And thanks to the way Canada's system works, Canadian policy actually could end up being pushed to the left. Canadian elections, like American elections, are a first past the post system, meaning the country is divided into different legislative districts called ridings, and whichever candidate gets the most votes in a riding wins. However, Canada is a parliamentary system, meaning Canadians don't directly elect their prime minister. Control of the executive is determined by which party can win the most support in parliament. Oh, so they don't actually vote for the prime minister, but since his Liberal Party has more votes than anybody else, it's not an outright majority because, like I said, it's all split up by other Liberal parties. But that one party has more votes than any other individual party, so they get to pick them.
And you should know, my dear, Utu says you described it perfectly.
Oh, Utu, you know what? I actually got most of my information from your post. I was like, oh, so it's kind of like a Nader effect. So many people voted for Ralph Nader that it gave, what's his face, Bush the presidency. But anyway, okay, thank you. So the key fights in the ridings are typically between the two leading center-left and center-right parties, the Liberals and the Conservatives. However, there are several smaller parties that can compete on the national level. The left-wing New Democratic Party, which is NDP, the Quebec-specific Bloc Québécois, BQ, the government-focused Greens, and the far-right populist People's Party of Canada, PPC. In this kind of system, the division of votes between the different parties really matters. A riding with a progressive majority of voters could end up electing a conservative to parliament if progressive voters split their votes. Okay. So even if overall there was more of a vote for the left, if the far-right party individually got the most votes, they would have been able to pick their prime minister. So...
Okay.
The big fear, I'll make you a flow chart after the show. The big fear among Liberals in this election was that this vote splitting would cost them seats. In the last election, in 2015, Trudeau won as an ethically clean, socially progressive uniter. While Trudeau accomplished a decent amount, including marijuana legislation and a federal carbon tax, many Canadians felt disappointed by Trudeau. such as pointing to inaction on indigenous issues and his support for oil pipelines. Okay, and then it talks about the scandals. I'm skipping a couple paragraphs. So they ran a campaign aimed at scaring Canadian progressives, trying to convince them that a vote for the NDP, that was the far-right party, or the Greens, could effectively be a vote for the Conservatives. Yes. Liberal messaging emphasized conservative leader Scheer, I don't even know if it's Scheer or Skier, I don't know, past opposition to same-sex marriage as well as his personal opposition to abortion, even though he said he wouldn't outlaw it. It seems like the attacks worked. Trudeau and the Liberals, who had been behind in the national poll averages as recently as 5 days ago, held on to enough votes to maintain control of government. The Conservatives won more seats, but not enough. The NDP underperformed, while the BQ did extremely well in his home base of Quebec. Liberals lost a number of seats in Parliament, however. How many was unclear as of Monday night, but enough to no longer control an outright majority of seats. Instead, they'll have to rely on votes from other parties to pass legislation, which sounds like it's still doable. This means that Liberals will not be able to simply impose their will through the legislature as they've done for the past 4 years. Instead, on issues ranging from climate change to the economy, they'll need to win buy-in from some of the smaller parties, with their most natural allies being the NDP. That should, in theory, push legislation to the left, as the Liberals will need to make policy concessions to the NDP in exchange for votes. Oh, all right. This is much more interesting than what we do over here. So I think that's about it, but that kind of gives you an idea. Okay, so if like kind of the moderate left has to work with the extreme left, then they have to give some concessions that are more extreme than what they would have done. So it might, like, overall move things more to the left.
Complicated. So we got more than two parties, huh? I mean, technically we do, but yeah, but they aren't anything.
It's their parliament. I think I'm not. Yeah. Well, I guess the parliament, if they pick the prime minister, yeah. So they've got a bunch. The Greens, the NPD, the one in Quebec, and the People's Party, which always means one thing. It's like the far right.
Then Utu said, historically, Canada, there's too many N's there, buddy. Historically, Canada has done good under minority governments because the parties have to work together.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense.
Fucking pipe dream.
I know. I don't know why we had to have, like, the bright idea of the Constitution and how ours is set up.
I mean, I don't know that our parties have ever been quite as divided as they are these days.
I don't think they have. I think it's way worse than ever. I mean, I'm sure everybody thinks that of their generation, but this is particularly bad, I think.
Yeah, pretty bad. So let's see. I'm trying to remember some of this stuff that happened. We took the day off yesterday, so that put us behind. Then their weekend news.
The story is like the Trump saying that he's being lynched by this impeachment probe, and I can read that.
Yeah.
Let's talk about it. Okay, let's see.
Yeah. It's not okay.
Do you want to read this one?
Okay.
I'll kind of read it out.
Let's see. Foul. Trump calls impeachment a lynching. Trump likens impeachment inquiry to a lynching in Twitter outburst. See, this is what I was saying to Marta. I'm glad that Twitter didn't suspend his account, even though that would just make him just flip out. He really buries his ass on Twitter all the time. This is how he gets in most of his trouble. President also suggested Democrats are carrying out the investigation without due process or fairness or any legal rights. Okay, now I need to stop right here before I even get into the story because I'm sick of hearing this, and I know he fucking tells his base this all the time. You get your due process when you're on trial, bitch. Okay? This is an investigation. You don't get a due process during an investigation until it's your turn to fucking testify. You know, when you get up there to testify, I'm sure you probably get to have your lawyer next to you and shit like that. But there's no due process until they finally figure out all of the things that they're going to charge you with.
He's characterizing himself as a victim,
Yeah.
and he knows that due process is a word that our side likes to use, you know, when black men get killed for no reason or arrested or whatever. So he's, you know, piggybacking on our terminology. He gets no due process. Sorry, dude. It's an impeachment.
So he said that, and then he said, all Republicans must remember what they are witnessing here, a lynching. But we will win, he tweeted. Now,
that is such a trigger word for me. Like, I'm white, and it triggers me. Like, I'm not trying to call you out, but you wanted to put the word lynching in our headline, and I was like, no, I do not want it in our headline. I will never write it. You know, I'll say it to read a story, but that word really triggers me. So, not okay for him. That word triggers me more than witch war. So, not okay.
And he spent the past several days, late into last week and over the weekend, really like trying to force the GOP into solidarity and calling upon them to, you know, they need to be tougher on the impeachment inquiry. I think they need to be tougher in the impeachment inquiry, but he's really scared right now, and he's trying to pull everybody together, pull his side together, because he's scared. Let's see, House Majority Whip James Clyburn, DSC, one of the most influential black lawmakers in Congress, rebuked Trump's use of the word on CNN, saying, I'm a product of the South. I know the history of that word. That is a word that we ought to be very, very careful about using.
I'm not even a product of the South. I'm white. White. No, half Jewish, which some people will argue isn't white, but I look white. I refuse to use that word. It's horrible. It's like really, really bad. So this guy is right.
Well, and I've always kind of wondered, maybe they've updated dictionaries since when I was studying for law enforcement. But I recall very specifically the definition at that time was taking somebody out of the custody of a law enforcement officer. Goes back to Old West days and shit. It becomes this black thing, and I never saw it changed in the dictionary. And it's like, you know, if a word's got a common usage for long enough, they changed the dictionary. And, you know, I haven't looked since I was, you know, studying to be a cop. In the dictionary, it says taking a person out of the custody of a law enforcement officer. Lynching. It doesn't even require hanging. The taking them out of custody is so technically El Chapo's son was lynched by his soldiers when they took him out of custody. I mean, that originally what the word meant. And as of, you know, like the 90s, that definition in the dictionary and the legal definition had not been changed. But at any rate, that's just a little side thing that I think about. You know, I've studied presidential history quite a bit, and I don't know if we've ever seen anything quite like this, he said. Lynchings, often by hanging, were a common form of white terrorism in the South during the grim Jim Crow era, which stretched from the end of Reconstruction in 1877 to the 1960s. Thousands of black Americans lost their lives to lynch mobs over this period, according to the NAACP. And so now the White House is trying to spin the narrative, saying that he's trying to refer to... Yeah, okay. Your turn. Do you have it? No, I'm just was waiting for you to be ready, and then I'd stick the mic in your face.
Okay, because, yeah, right now you're hogging it. Okay. White House spokesman attempts to defend Trump's lynching remarks. Hogan Gidley told reporters on Tuesday that Trump wasn't, quote, comparing what's happened to him with one of our darkest moments in American history, end quote.
Was that a real name? Hogan Gidley.
That's what I was wondering. I was like, I've never heard of that guy before. But you know what? God, I hope they don't listen to our show, because Trump's going to be like, oh, in the dictionary, this is what lynching means. And then he's going to say what he was talking about. Say, like, well,
like I
the
said,
dictionary definition was not what happened in American history.
yeah, well, like I said, it was early 90s, so hopefully they've changed it by then.
Okay. On the heels of a tweet from President Donald Trump on Tuesday morning, where he compared the ongoing impeachment inquiry against him to a lynching, White House Deputy Press Secretary Hogan Gidley. Well, how come I've never heard of him?
Yeah. He knew?
I don't know.
He's always firing people.
Okay, so I don't know. Okay. White House Deputy Press Secretary Hogan Gidley offered a defense that completely skirted the issue at hand. While talking to reporters outside the White House, Gidley said that Trump wasn't comparing what's happened to him with one of our darkest moments in American history. Thousands of black Americans were killed by lynch mobs in the Jim Crow-era South. And, quote, I understand that there are many people in the media who don't agree with this language. He has used many words to describe the way he's been relentlessly attacked. The spokesman went on to say that Trump has done, quote, many things to help African American communities. While Gidley argued that Trump did not mean to compare his impeachment inquiry to one of America's darkest moments, the president used that exact language in his Tuesday tweet. Quote, so someday, if a Democrat becomes president and the Republicans win the House, even by a tiny margin, they can impeach the president without due process or fairness or any legal rights. All Republicans must remember what they are witnessing, a lynching, but we will win. So right away, like before we even get a new president, he wants them to like already plan the impeachment. That's not how it works. You have to actually do something bad.
Yes.
You can't just plan. Okay, guys, we gotta win minority of the House, and then we get to impeach whoever. It's like, no, no. Oh, and I read another story. I'm gonna read it today, but I read another story where he went on Fox and started complaining about Obama and saying that he should have been impeached. So that's his new buzzword. Impeach them, impeach them, impeach that.
For what?
Because narcissists, they repeat what they are.
Yeah. Did he like give an example of why he should have been impeached? Because he also tried to say, well, Obama had a book deal and a deal with Netflix, and I bet he did that before when he's still president.
Okay, Gidley's attempts to tell reporters about Trump's contributions to African American communities echoed his experience on Fox News earlier Tuesday. Quote, HBCU funding is at historic levels, explained Gidley in the segment, who added factoids about the opportunity zones in inner cities, criminal justice reform, and more. Gidley also provided Gidley also provided a similar defense of Trump's language. Quote, okay, again, the president wasn't trying to compare himself to the horrific history of this country at all, said Gidley. Oh, okay. So I was scrolling down to hear him elaborate on that, because he keeps saying that. The president wasn't trying to compare himself. So I scrolled down, but that's the end of the story.
That's all he had to say?
Yeah, that's all he has to say.
Wow.
Yeah.
And, you know, it keeps going on and on. It's like the Congress has absolute legal right to do this. Matter of fact, it's their job. Matter of fact, they didn't do their job for far too long. In my book and a lot of people's book. This is their job, and it just became so glaring that they just are forced to do their job. And hopefully, it'll become so glaring at some point that the GOP can see it too. So, this one, our troops retreating from Syria were pelted with rotten vegetables and potatoes. That's kind of dangerous, potatoes. I thought it was tomatoes at first.
Yeah. You say tomato, I say
potato.
Okay,
Yeah.
so, yeah, and the other thing is when he first said that he was pulling him out, he kind of made it seem like they were going to go home. He was like, no more endless wars, you know, so people could get behind it. But all those troops are going to Iraq.
Yeah, but Iraq says, well, they don't have permission to come here. So I don't know how that's going to work out.
Oh, so they don't want him there.
They don't want him there. Supposed to go there to fight ISIS, who I thought Trump beat.
Are they just going to, like, fly around in the air waiting for permission?
I don't know. They're probably just going to go there anyways. I mean, what's Iraq going to do?
Well, yeah, but so that's an invasion then if we go there and they don't want us there.
We already have some troops there, right? I think we do.
I thought we did.
I don't I can't keep track of it anymore.
There's a bunch of Brexit stuff, but I'm not even going to try to explain that. I keep saying that every time it comes up. Like, I can attempt to explain the Canadian stuff, but Brexit, I don't know. I don't know if it's good or bad. I know that I don't like Boris Johnson, so if he's happy, I'm angry. If he's angry, I'm happy. So that's kind of how my litmus test for him.
Well, it seems like the people want this Brexit thing, but the problem is if they do it without a deal, the economy collapses and everything goes to shit.
So explain it. What kind of deal are they looking for?
You've got to have plans in place for what's going to happen to the money. For one thing.
Okay. Obviously, UK wants to be its own entity, but right now the economy is intertwined with the rest of Europe, and so they want to.
Because I think they have the.
So is that the only problem, that they want to get their economy back?
No, I mean there's everything. Your infrastructure, everything has to be set up. They have it's changing the entire form of government from what it was, but that's one of the things.
Back to where it was before they joined the EU.
I don't know, and what happens to their EU dollars? They become useless.
Well, they go back to pounds, I guess. I mean, they've got to be somewhere in circulation if they didn't burn it, right?
It seems to me like right away there you would have to have some sort of plan for that. What's the exchange rate for EU? I forget what they call them.
Okay, so why do they... Oh, God, I totally forgot, too. What's their currency? Shit.
I knew it a second ago, and then it left my brain.
Oh, my God, what's happening? Okay, you start talking.
Okay.
And then we're going to feel really stupid when I figure it out.
Yeah, but we got this, got Boris Johnson, and then almost got this crazy right-winger in Canada. It's like our virus is spreading. Got dictators in South America shouting about fake news.
And that's the thing. Like, we're talking here, euro.
Ah, the euro. Yes, what happens to the euro?
I really had a major brain fart because obviously I know that they use euros. But anyway, so why did they join in the first place if they're only going to be there for a couple years and decide they don't like it?
For some reason,
I remember they were actually like the last holdouts, and they still had their currency, and then something happened, and then now they want to go back.
Somehow it didn't work out. But then there's the Ireland situation, which is already complicated as I understand it. Half of Ireland's free and Northern Ireland's still held by Britain. So there was something about there would be a hard...
That's where Belfast is in the north.
There was something about there would be a hard border in between the two halves of Ireland. And I always thought that was kind of weird because it was in Belfast that, the Irish freedom fighters fought for their freedom, and then they got it for the rest of the country, but not for Belfast. So that kind of sucks, doesn't it?
Huh.
The IRA is probably going to come back.
Yeah.
Kind of sounds like they are, anyway.
I don't even, So, yeah, what I was saying is that, like, this neoconservative movement that's sweeping the planet, it's not just like our stupid, uneducated people living in the middle of nowhere who are voting for conservative. It's happening everywhere in the world. And like, why is this just like a general cycle? I mean, to us it's like a big deal because we're alive right now, but maybe like in the greater scheme of things, they have these occasional blips, like every several hundred years or so, and it's like not really a big deal in the greater scheme of things.
Okay, I've got the latest on the Trump impeachment inquiry. That'll probably be several stories worth. Let's see.
And I got something about the impeachment.
Okay. Where things stand now. Ambassador Bill Taylor, a key witness to the White House impeachment inquiry, is testifying before 3 House committees today. What Trump is saying. The president used a racially charged term to describe the impeachment inquiry, calling the process a lynching. We covered that. House Democrats hope to have a potential vote to impeach Trump by Thanksgiving. That timeline could now slip closer to the end of the year. Well, because they keep finding more shit. Republican Center on Trump's mark. I wouldn't use the word lynching. Tim Scott, blah, blah, blah. what House Democrats are saying about Taylor's testimony. Democratic lawmakers are reacting today to acting U.S. Ambassador to Ukraine, Bill Taylor's testimony. Oh, you got a bigger... Here.
I don't know if it's better. Remember
This is just like a little blurb.
Okay, but it's Bill Taylor, right?
Okay, yeah.
Okay. That's so funny. Top diplomat to Ukraine provides disturbing account in House impeachment probe. Bill Taylor, the acting U.S. ambassador to Ukraine, answered questions in a closed-door deposition with House lawmakers Tuesday. Former U.S. Ambassador William Taylor, a diplomat who has sharply questioned President Donald Trump's policy on Ukraine, has provided lawmakers with a, quote, disturbing account of events at the center of the impeachment probe, Democrats said Tuesday. Lawmakers emerging after the early hours of the private deposition said Taylor had given a lengthy opening statement with the recall of events that filled in gaps from the testimony of other witnesses. He indicated to lawmakers he kept records at the time. Quote, the testimony is very disturbing, New York Rep. Carolyn Maloney said. New York Rep. Carolyn Maloney. Rep. Dean Phillips, D. Minnesota, used the same word. Asked why, he said, because it's becoming more distinct. Taylor's appearance is among the most watched because of a text message released by House investigators earlier in the probe, it's that guy, in which he called Trump's attempt to leverage military aid to Ukraine in return for a political investigation, quote, crazy. Rep. Debbie Wasserman said Taylor, quote, drew a straight line with documents, timelines, and individual conversations in his records at the... Okay, so this guy keeps records like a motherfucker, and he handed everything over to them. So he drew a straight line. They are no longer confused, and it's disturbing. Quote, I do not know how you would listen to today's testimony from Ambassador Taylor and come to any other conclusion except that the president abused his power and withheld foreign aid. Lawmakers did not discuss details of what they heard in the closed-door session that was expected to continue all day, and Taylor declined to comment as he entered the deposition. He was the latest diplomat with concerns to testify. Like the others, he was subpoenaed to appear. Rep. Amy Barra, a career civil servant, had a better recall of details than Gordon Sondland, the U.S. European Union ambassador who testified last week. Taylor was expected to discuss text messages he exchanged with two other diplomats earlier this year as Trump pushed Ukraine to investigate claims about Democratic rival Joe Biden's family and a debunked conspiracy theory about Ukraine's role in the 2016 election. This was one sentence.
Wow.
Okay. The diplomat was one of several intermediaries between Trump and Ukrainian officials as the president advocated for the investigations. Taylor had been chosen to run the embassy there after the administration abruptly ousted the ambassador, Marie Yovanovitch. In a series of text messages released earlier this month by U.S. envoy to Ukraine, Kurt Volker, Taylor appeared to be alarmed by Trump's efforts, as the U.S. was also withholding military assistance to Ukraine that had already been approved by Congress. Quote, I think it's crazy to withhold security assistance for help with a political campaign, Taylor wrote in excerpts of the text messages released by impeachment investigators. He has stood by that observation in his private remarks to investigators, according to a person familiar with his testimony. Taylor's description of Trump's position is in sharp contrast to how the president has characterized it. Trump has said many times that there was no quid pro quo, though his acting chief of staff, Mick Mulvaney, contradicted that last week. Mulvaney later tried to walk back his remarks. Taylor, a former Army officer, had been serving as executive vice president at the U.S. Institute of Peace, a nonpartisan think tank funded by Congress, where he was appointed to run the embassy in Kyiv after Yovanovitch was removed before the end of her term, following a campaign against her led by Trump's personal lawyer, Rudy Giuliani. This person had, and it's not a run-on, they're using proper commas and stuff, but it's like a huge paragraph. Every single sentence is a huge paragraph. Oh, here's a short one. He had served as U.S. ambassador to Ukraine from 2006 to 2009. Quote, "He's the epitome of a seasoned statesman," said John Smorhan, an American who heads the agricultural company Agro Generation. Before retiring from government service, Taylor was involved in diplomatic efforts, including several major international conflicts. He served in Jerusalem as U.S. envoy to the Quartet of Mideast Peacemakers. He oversaw reconstruction in Iraq from 2004 to 2005, and from Kabul coordinated U.S. and international assistance to Afghanistan from 2002 to 2003. He arrived in Kiev a month after the sudden departure of Yovanovitch and the inauguration of Ukraine's new president, prepared to steer the embassy through the transition. He was most likely not prepared for what happened next. In July, Trump would have his now famous phone conversation with President Volodymyr Zelensky, in which he pressed the new Ukrainian president to launch the investigations. Trump at the time had quietly put a hold on the nearly $400 million in military aid to Ukraine that they were counting on in their fight against Russian-backed separatists. In the follow-up to the call, Taylor exchanged texts with two of Trump's point men on Ukraine as they were trying to get Zelensky to commit to the investigations before setting a date for a coveted White House visit. In a text message to Sondland on September 1st, Taylor bluntly questioned the president's moves. "Are we now saying that security assistance and White House meetings are conditioned on investigations?" End quote. Sondland, U.S. ambassador to the European Union, told him to call on the phone. In texts a week later to Sondland and Special Envoy Volker, Taylor expressed increased concern, calling it crazy to withhold security assistance for help with the political campaign. In reply several hours later, Sondland defended Trump's intentions and suggested they stop the back-and-forth text. It's almost over. A couple more long paragraphs. Taylor had also texted that not giving the military aid to Ukraine would be his nightmare scenario because it would send the wrong message to both Kiev and Moscow. "The Russians love it, and I quit." U.S. diplomats based at the Kiev embassy have refused to speak with journalists, reflecting the sensitivity of the impeachment inquiry. The embassy press office did not respond to a request for comment on Monday. So this guy really was not okay. Was not okay the entire time that this has been going on, and he was a meticulous keeper of records, and he gave them everything they needed.
Yeah.
But now they know his name, so I hope
I'm sure we're protecting the fuck out of these people.
Yeah, I hope so.
Let's do some music. We'll be right back. Oh, not that one. I hit the wrong one.
Like a rock, like a planet, like a fucking atom bomb. I'll remain unperturbed by the joy and the madness that I encounter everywhere I turn. I've seen it all along, in books and magazines, like a twitch before dying, like a pornographic scene. There's a bar behind the window, there's an ugly laughing man, like a hummingbird in silence, like the blood on my door. It's a generator. Me clean and I will run until I reach the shore. I've known it all along, like the bone under my skin, like actors in a photograph, like paper in the wind. There's a hammer by the window, there's a knife on the floor, like turbines in darkness, like the blood on my door. It's the generator.
a beautiful day. It's a Beautiful Day comes to you Monday through Friday at 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, unless we say otherwise. And usually we say otherwise on our Facebook page, nowhere else. So you won't know if you're not subscribing to our Facebook page or following it or whatever the hell that is, liking it. I don't know. But get over there. Just look it up, Widdershins on Facebook, Widdershins Radio. And tonight, we'll be back at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time for our regular Widdershins broadcast, where we talk about, the crazy stuff that goes on in the magical communities. And we got quite a show tonight. We got some fuckery coming, some serious fuckery. It's going to sound very familiar to a lot of fuckery that we've covered on the show, but I'm not going to give away too much. But you got to come, tonight, 5 p.m., or at least check out the archives, because this will be a hell of a show. We got a lot of fuckery to talk about. And so, honey, you were just reading about Taylor testifying and all the stuff that came out, the Democrats are talking about. So 11 minutes ago, this story comes out. Well, actually, I should tell you, Boris Johnson's thing to have he was like trying to rush Brexit through within 3 days. That apparently just failed. I just got an update. I don't know what time of day it is over there.
I think they're, I want to say maybe 8 or 9 hours ahead. Because, I know Ukraine is 10 hours ahead, and Ukraine is further. So I don't know. I would say 8 or 9.
Well, look at this one. This came out as a result of what just came out, I'm sure. Trump allies are pushing the president to accept impeachment by the House, source says.
Trump allies are pushing him to accept it?
Yes, a source familiar with... A source familiar with conversations President Trump is having with allies tells CNN that the president has been encouraged in recent days to accept the fact that he will most surely be impeached by the House, and that it's time to start attacking the impeachment process more aggressively. And we've seen him do that.
So he is attacking the impeachment process?
Yeah, that's what he's been doing for days now.
So they're telling him to accept it and attack it.
Yeah, and there's more. Until recently, the president has been telling allies that he could keep the House from impeaching him, that he could convince vulnerable Democrats from Trump districts that it would be political suicide for them to vote with Democratic leadership. He had thought that by beating up on the 24 or so Democrats from swing districts that he could change their minds and his own fate in the House. But CNN is told that several people close to him have been working with him in recent days to explain that it is incredibly unlikely at this point, and that the best he can do is to trivialize the process. He's also being encouraged to focus rhetorically more on domestic policy issues like House Democrats moving slowly on U.S., Mexico, Canada trade agreement and the economy. This is not a new refrain from Trump advisors, but it's at least more stark now with the impeachment process backdrop. Wow, that's an interesting story. Let's see. Yeah. So you were talking about Taylor. Here's a couple other people that you didn't read. Massachusetts Representative Stephen Lynch said Taylor's testimony is a sea change. He said...
Is that a Republican?
That's I'm not sure. Massachusetts Representative, probably not.
They didn't even say? They usually have it in...
Yeah, they didn't say it there. He said Taylor's testimony could lead the committee to revisit previous witnesses. Lynch would not specify which witnesses he would like to hear from again.
Maybe that's what he was talking about. He was saying it was Lynch doing it. He spoke. Sorry, go ahead.
He would like to hear from him again. He also said Taylor referenced personal notes that he took. You talked about that. He kept extensive notes of all of this, Lynch continued. I think it could accelerate matters. This will, I think, answer more questions than it raises. Let's put it that way. Couple other people.
So this guy's a superstar.
Yeah, the New Jersey rep. See, again, they're not saying Republican or Democrat. Said Taylor's testimony resolved any remaining doubts I may have. Virginia Representative Jerry Connolly said the testimony confirmed what he already believed. He also said that the need for John Bolton's testimony appears more urgent every day. It took Bill Taylor an hour to deliver his opening statement. You talked about that. EU ambassador cited political investigations as a possible reason for Ukraine aid delay. See, this guy's in the know. Let's see. I'm not even sure if we have any. We got a lot of breaking news happening, so I'm going to check the headlines again and see.
I'll read that one thing that Tennessee guy did and always go to Breitbart.
Okay, what you got?
Well, that's the thing that we were kind of laughing and crying at the same time over, that Tennessee county official.
Yeah.
This is neither here or there. It has nothing to do with Canada or the impeachment.
Speaks to the troubled state of our country, though.
Yeah, so these are the people who got our president in office, in addition to those who didn't vote and voted green. County official rants about a, quote, queer running for president and the loss of white men's rights. And of course, it's going to freeze on me. Hold on. Okay. A county commissioner in Tennessee, surprise, surprise, a county commissioner in Tennessee launched a tirade against the Democratic presidential field and the general state of white men in America on Monday during a debate about guns. Warren Hurst, who sits on the Sevier County Commission, spoke up during a discussion on an upcoming vote to become a gun sanctuary city. He told the crowd, many of whom were holding little American flags, that it was time to wake up, people. And he doesn't mean wake up, comma, people. He means wake up, people, instead of wake people up. Quote, "We got a queer running for president, if that ain't about as ugly as you can get," he said in comments captured by Knoxville-based station WVLT. Quote, "Look what we got running for president in the Democratic Party. We can go over here to Haas Jail and get better people out of there than those running for the Democratic nomination to be president of the United States." Pete Buttigieg, the mayor of South Bend, Indiana, is running in the Democratic primary. If elected, he would be the first openly gay president. His campaign didn't immediately return a request for comment. At least one objected to Hearst's remarks and stormed out, but others applauded and agreed with him. And when somebody starts speaking with these next three words that I'm about to say, you know what the truth is. So, quote, "I'm not prejudiced, but by golly, a white male in this country has very few rights, and they're getting taken." Oh, okay. "I'm not prejudiced, but by golly, a white male in this country has very few rights, and they're getting took more every day." He said they're getting.
Yeah, don't try and make them sound smarter.
No, I accidentally almost said taken, but they're getting took more every day. The commission, and he's a commissioner. Like, I don't even know.
I'm sure he's the education commissioner.
In a follow-up interview with WVLT, he stood by his comments and noted that he has some black friends. HuffPost repeatedly attempted to contact Hearst, but his line was busy. Quote, "Sevier County Commissioner Warren Hurst is using his position of power to publicly spew bigotry against LGBTQ people who are very likely his own constituents." Okay, constituents, so he's an elected official. "A group of people having rights doesn't take away those of another." Nick Moreau, a spokesman with the LGBTQ equality group Human Rights Campaign, said. Moreau grew up in one county over from Sevier. Quote, "But with LGBTQ people running for office at every level of government and more people voting for candidates who support equality, he should be more worried about losing his seat than losing his rights." That's it. That's what we have going on right now.
That's
Some sort of elected official, commissioner in Tennessee, and he said our rights are being took, and we have a queer running for president. And by golly, I have a lot of black friends.
Jesus. All right, we got anything else?
I was going to look at the Breitbart headlines.
Yes. Gotta do that. That's the highlight of the show.
And just headlines. I'm just not going to read it. Okay, let's see. Okay, I don't even know what this means, but there's some very unattractive man saying, "Dem mob, trumped again," or whatever. Hillary crazy. Trump, quote, going to be very, very hard to beat if not impeached. Also Hillary. He might not be GOP nominee. Well, yeah, if he's kicked off. Biden's favorability drops post-debate. 2020 panic. Democrat establishment hoping for a white knight to enter race. Chaos USA. Jury decides against father seeking to block 7-year-old son from gender transition. They did it right this time. Apple CEO Tim Cook named chairman at top Chinese business school. More campus violence on Turning Point USA students. They don't even know how to form complete sentences here. Let's see. Charles Barkley defends Chairman James over China again. Oh, Jimmy Carter hospitalized after fall at Georgia home. We didn't get that on our end, so it's probably not that bad. Kanye's pastor says West almost gave up rap, called it the devil's music. We talked about that, didn't we?
Yeah, it's like if you're Christian and you say it's the devil's music, what do you mean almost gave it up? Have some conviction, bitch.
Well, he probably figured that he won't be able to make as much money, so who cares if it's the devil's music, ultimately.
Yeah, what would Jesus do? Make more money?
Oh, well, at least they have kind of something similar. I'm not going to read the story, but their headline says, break the internet. Trump calls impeachment lynching, quote. So I don't know if they mean it as a good thing or a bad thing, but let's see. Judicial. Remember yesterday, Pennsylvania considers heartbeat abortion bill. Louisiana Democrat John Bel Edwards brings in Team Hillary for backup. MAGA rebound. Manufacturing unexpectedly strengthens. India's visa workers raise funds to launch attack ads on U.S. politicians. I remember I was looking for some news yesterday here, and I didn't find anything. And then after we ended the show, I just kept scrolling, and that's where I found all the news. And they bury stuff that kind of looks bad, even though they try to put their own spin on it. I'm sure they ultimately know that it looks bad, so they bury it. Let's see. Okay, I'm not seeing anything. Man named Tupac Shakur arrested for possessing meth. Look it.
White guy.
And he looks like he looks like a yokel. He doesn't have any teeth or anything. Gingrich responds to Romney's secret Twitter diss. Pierre doesn't matter in U.S. political history. Did we talk about that yesterday? How Mitt Romney has...
Because we didn't have a show yesterday.
Oh, Mitt Romney has like a fake Twitter account. And I don't know, according to Breitbart, he likes a bunch of Democrat stuff. And I don't know.
He mainly talk shit about conservatives and stuff.
Yeah, is his alter ego a Democrat?
I guess he didn't use it that much, but the times that he did use it was to criticize Republicans mostly.
That's funny. Okay, let's see. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez decries income inequality after endorsing millionaire. She's endorsing Bernie. Okay.
All right. It's a beautiful day, and we out.
A new age of reason, brain treason to trick the mind. What good is searching if nothing's there to find? We arrive at this place of no return, my brothers, only to discover that our minds have led us away so far from the paper truth of who we are. What's right is wrong, what's gone is gone, what's clear and pure is not so sure. All promises become a lie, all that's benign corrupts and died. All the periphery lost, beg for forgiveness only after you tally the cost. We arrive at this place of no return, my sisters, only to discover that our values